Why take one vacation with the family when you could take all of them? With Royal Caribbean, you don't just go to the beach. You visit a private island and race down the tallest water slide in North America. You don't just go for a road trip. You ATV and zip line through the jungle. You don't just go somewhere new. You rappel down waterfalls and discover ancient temples. Because this isn't just any vacation. This is all the vacations. Come seek the Royal Caribbean. Ships Registry, Bahamas.
Are you ready to make a difference in the lives of fathers and their families? Support the Show Up Dad podcast and empower the next generation of dads to lead with confidence and love. Your donation of $50, $100, and $250 can provide a dad with essential resources. We'd also like to introduce to you our incredible partner, Tallman Equipment. Since 1952, Tallman Equipment has been the leading provider of top quality lineman tools. Their reliable and durable equipment ensures safety and efficiency on the job. If you're in need of trustworthy tools, look no further than Tallman Equipment. Don't forget to visit our online shop at the Show Up Shop, myshopify.com, for high quality products that support our cause. From t-shirts and hoodies to stickers and children's clothes, we have something for everyone. By purchasing from our shop, you not only show your support for our cause, but you also will be getting a high quality product. So I just want to welcome everybody to our show today, the Show Up Dad. We got an interesting guest here, Conor Trombetta. I just want to welcome him to our show. Conor is a San Diego-based lawyer with an impressive background. He has served as a special agent with Homeland Security investigations, a deputy district attorney with Contra Costa County, say that right, and an associate attorney with Quinn Emanuel, one of the nation's top litigation firms. He's a graduate of San Diego State University and Georgetown University Law Center. Conor now runs Trombetta Law, advocating for individuals and businesses facing injustice. So get ready to be inspired as we delve into Conor's journey and the importance of legacy advocacy or legal advocacy. Welcome, Conor.
Thanks so much for having me, David. It's a pleasure to be here and to be a part of such a great mission.
For sure, man. Well, Conor, man, I saw you, dude, and I was like, man, this guy has an interesting story. You know, I need to find out a little bit more about this guy. You know, being a former wrestler myself, I've always been drawn to other wrestlers. And I recently, not even recently, it was about a year ago, I got to interview a man who won the Masters, right? He went to the Olympics for wrestling in his 40s, and he went from homeless to world champion wrestler. I thought that was pretty interesting. He was on Sports Illustrated. And I always like just interviewing wrestlers, you know, just because of the training that's involved, the level of endurance it takes, both mentally and physically, and just being able to transpire that strength that you learn from that sport, right, into something greater like you did yourself. So, man, thank you for coming on the show, bro.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that so much. And you know, it's so true when you say that you're drawn to other wrestlers, because I'll meet somebody out in public or, you know, at a networking event or something, and we'll be chatting, and slowly one of us will recognize that the other person used to wrestle, and one of us will inevitably ask the other person, oh, hey, did you wrestle? And it's almost like this weird intuition. And it's unlike any other sport where when you know that another person also went through the journey that is becoming a wrestler, you automatically have this immediate rapport and connection, unlike any other sport. And it's also funny that you mentioned doing the background research for me, because it's, as I've progressed with the firm, we started to have more digital media, you know, and web presence. But in the early stages, people would Google me, and all that would pop up would be my old high school photos of me wrestling. And I'm sure your school had it too, where we have these funky like playoff traditions, right, where we have to like bleach our hair. And they're like, you're not a blonde anymore. And I'm like, no, I never was. It was a temporary thing. It wasn't a fashion move. It's tradition, and it's part of the wrestling thing. You know, I don't expect you to understand it, but yeah, it's so true. And just such a great community and a great foundation to come from.
Well, no, I can't agree with you more, Conor. Let's dive into this, brother. Can you tell us a bit more about your experience growing up with like a single mom and how that shaped your motivation and drive? Let our audience know where you came from, brother, if you don't mind.
Yeah, absolutely. So came from a small town up in Northern California, Napa, obviously known for its wine, right? Wine region famous. but raised by a single mom. I've met my dad one time in my life, but otherwise was pretty much MIA, right? And so
Mm.
my mom and I have always just had this amazing, unique relationship because at a very young age, I took on a lot of responsibility, and we ran our household more like a team than we did, her kind of being the chain of command and passing down the orders. I mean, don't get me wrong, like she's a very classic Italian mother, so when she needed to, she would, but it was a lot of us figuring things out together. And I can vividly remember things like going to my first football practice and looking at the pads. I was 8 years old, right? And we're looking
Yeah.
at the thigh pads and the knee pads, and I'm like, she's like, I don't know which one goes where. So I ended up showing up to practice, with my thigh pads on my knees and my knee pads on my thighs, and funny things like that, or learning how to like tow a trailer, right? Like neither of us had ever towed a trailer before, and so we just kind of figured those things out together.
Hmm.
And growing up in the community, playing sports, being surrounded by a lot of I have a close group of 7 friends, and we've been friends since basically elementary or preschool, and all of their fathers were definitely role models, but it was just kind of me and her. And so when I looked at it from that lens, I was like just immediately motivated to prove that I could do everything that any of these other young men and women were doing with a full, traditional family.
Hmm.
And she really became that motivation for me. And so when it was, on the wrestling mat, training, when we would celebrate wins, it was like I still remember like winning tournaments and running up and giving my mom a hug and
Hmm.
dedicating things to her. And those late nights in the library during law school, grinding away. It was always her in the back of my mind and wanting to honor the amazing woman that she is and the great job that she had done raising me, filling that gap, and wearing, wearing 2 hats, right?
Yeah.
And it still to this day is a huge motivator for me, right? With everything I do, she's always in the background, and her guidance and words of advice and her baseline philosophy still carries a lot of the principles that I carry today.
Yeah. I thought that was interesting, because you're absolutely right. Something as simple as learning how to hook up a trailer or even drive a trailer or, all these different things that a father shows his son, right? And how you guys both had to work together as a group, you know what I mean? As a force, you know what I mean? To learn this and grow together, I always like to ask a question for guys who grew up with a single parent, right? How did you see, looking back, the effects that it took on your mom? You know what I mean? Like, did you
Hmm.
see her like super tired and you know what I mean? Like, was there any kind of role that you played where like, come on, mom, you're okay, or anything like that? Where you
Yeah,
had
I
to support
mean,
her?
she, gosh, she is, and she'd never admit it, like I called her
Yeah.
today before I went on and was like, looking for the pep talk. And she's like, oh,
Hmm.
I didn't do anything. I just brought you onto this earth. And I'm like, oh, you're too humble, right? But she was always that woman that like did not want me to see any
Mm.
like that vulnerability in her. And so there were moments I remember like we had just moved into this new house together, and we had a dog, and I remember we came home and we had those wooden shutter blinds that
Yeah.
like collapse up in there. I guess little me, I don't know, but I guess they're apparently very expensive. And we had come home and the dog had torn down all like every single set of blinds in the entire house, and she
Mm.
was just like disheveled. And we're like, she's like, all right, but I still got to get him dinner. We still got to get these things taken care of. So she's just like, I can just tell she's going through it right now, dealing with a dog and a kid, and managing work in her own life, right?
Hmm.
Um, and just like going through the grocery store, and like we're just like lost putting things in the grocery cart. But um, I think that's one of the things though that I most admire about her, right? Is that work ethic and that balance. And I think it ties back to a lot of what I've heard from you in your previous podcast. I think the most recent one with your wife is just that prioritization of being a parent. And she
Hmm.
really just nailed it in that respect where I always came first. I mean, she always had a job, always worked, but with every job it was, hey, my son, I take care of my son by myself. I need to be off at this time to pick him up. If that means I got to come in early, I will. and he wrestles. So that means Saturdays I go to the tournaments, and Wednesday nights I have dual meets.
Hmm.
But and I can honestly say this, she has only missed one match in my entire life that I
Hmm.
wrestled. And that was because her, as myself, I think I inherited it from her. We are directionally challenged, and she actually got lost on her way to the tournament. So she showed up, and I remember her just being so upset. She's like, "I missed a match." I'm like, "There'll be more. Don't worry." But I think that, and I carry that with me today because it's so easy in a high demand lifestyle, whether when I was, serving as an agent or with a legal practice, especially, to just let the work occupy it all, because it never
Hmm.
stops. And there's always more that you can be doing, and always more that can be done on projects with clients, on cases. And I have to sit back and remind myself that, like, I like the analogy of life is like a glass, right? And
Yeah.
you can fill it with as many liquids as you want, but once that glass is full, it's full. So you gotta make a conscious decision on how you want to fill that glass and what you want to be in that glass and the percentage breakdowns. And I think she has been an amazing, inspiration for how to
Yeah.
do that, as a single parent.
No, for sure. I think a lot of times moms base their value on what how they parent their children, right? I know that's
Hmm.
something that my wife uh brought to my attention. She was really upset. She had missed a meeting for my daughter. She cheerleaded for Centennial High School, which is a really big football program out here. I mean, all their, you know, football games are televised and everything like that. It's really pretty prestigious. But my wife missed a meeting, right? And I specifically remember her being so down about it. I'm like thinking to myself, why are you mad? It's just one meeting. There's going to be plenty of meetings, And she's like, you don't understand. I don't want them to think that Nakota's mom is, whatever, absent or whatever. You know what I'm saying? So after dissecting it and talking to her and kind of walking her through that, we finally realized that, and this is my realization too, is that women put a lot of emphasis on being able to be there for their children, and when they're not able to do so, they take that upon themselves, right? They personalize that, right, as a personal failure on their behalf,
Yeah,
so.
absolutely. And actually, it's funny because I was listening to that same podcast, and your wife was discussing the cheerleading tryouts and her history with it.
Mhm.
But and I completely agree. I think, my sister, we share the same father, have different mothers, but and my
Mhm.
mom, it's something that I think, as a male counterpart, whether as a son, a brother, a husband, we, need to step up and recognize that, like, you know, both my mom and my sister told me, like, the minute that I had my child, like, the entire world changed. My entire perspective on it changed. Like, that is the number one priority. And it's our job as their counterpart in whatever capacity
Mhm.
to provide that support, to have that understanding, to engage in that communication that, supports them, provide those words of affirmation, right?
Mhm.
And really strive to understand, where they're coming from, and to help facilitate them in feeling like they're doing, the amazing job that I know they are.
Yes, yes, absolutely right. I think it's pretty interesting also how the bond between son and mother, how strong that is. I mean, I'm thinking now, and it's like, man, I'm closer to my mom than I am my own dad, and that's the same way my brother was. And I see that now even with my two sons. They're really, really drawn to mama, you know what I mean? And I
Hmm.
understand that right now at this age where they're at, they mama's mama. That's the first
Yes.
woman in their lives, right?
Yes.
So I understand that, and I know that eventually it's going to come a time where they're going to be like, okay, mama, I need to be a man. I need to start doing manly stuff. And that's where you get the
Hmm.
children challenging rules and boys becoming boys and wanting to do these off the wall crazy stuff because, they want to find out who they are. Right.
Absolutely. And you're so right there. And it's funny because I'm at the age now where my friends are beginning to have children, and I'm
Hmm.
beginning to see that develop out with them, right? With their children at younger ages. And I think you nailed it perfectly, right? Like it is this perfect, beautiful balance between mom and dad, and there are those stages of through a child's growth, through a young person's growth into adulthood, right? Where
Hmm.
there will be moments, where because of the stage they're at in their development, they're leaning more towards mom and her caregiving function and her compassion and those types of things. And then, as you said, like boys will be boys. Like you're gonna grow up. It's good. It's a good thing, right? That you're
Hmm.
challenging and you're beginning to learn boundaries and push the limits, because that applies to life, right?
Yeah.
If you're not doing that, both externally and internally, then you're not living up to your full potential. But it really is that balance. And I can say for my group of friends, that I really admire the way that they have balanced that and have began the process of sort of having that interplay between mom and dad.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
Yeah.
Now, you talked about wrestling. Okay. How did that come into your life and what impact did it have on you, brother? If you don't mind.
Yeah, so it's actually a pretty cool story. I was in middle school, just a scrawny little like shaggy haired kid running around.
Hmm.
At the time, I thought I was going to be a basketball player, and I know you can't see me standing up right now or see my jump shot, but I promise you I wasn't making it to the league anytime soon, right?
Yeah.
And my wrestling coach's now wife, but then fiance, was actually my middle school gym teacher,
Hmm.
and she was like, "Hey, you should go try out wrestling." And I had never really put much thought into it. Like I was always kind of like a scrappy little kid. I did a little bit of judo and stuff growing up, um, and like karate, those kinds of things. But I'd never like actually wrestled. You wrestle around with your friends and that kind of thing.
Hmm.
So I was like, "All right, yeah, I think I'll go check it out." And I remember going with a friend of mine, and we met the head coach, Nacho Franco, who's obviously is as we'll find out, is a huge part of my life and a huge inspiration for me. But I met him, and he was like, "Yeah, just like put some spare shoes on, hop out on the mat, like roll around." And like probably halfway through the practice, like once we did after like the first live roll, I remember thinking to myself, like, "This is it. I am home. I can be great at this." And I just it was like a duck on water, right? It was just one of those
Hmm.
aha moments. And I think for me, like impact wise in my life, it completely shaped the man that I am today and who I've become. Because I think the sport, it teaches you that with enough hard work and discipline and commitment, that you can accomplish anything, right? Because
Yeah.
unlike other sports like basketball, football, baseball, there's inherent physical gifts that make you either like a qualified um, participant in it. And of course, there's always exceptions, right? Like
Hmm.
within the sport. But the beauty of wrestling is that like none of that matters, right? What matters, your weight, your height, your physical gifts don't matter. It's how hard you want to work, how much you want to commit to it, and like how much of the grind that you really love. And
Hmm.
I just think that translates beautifully over into the real world, right? Whether it's life, relationships, your work, being a friend, anything, right? Is that's the real world. The real world
Yeah.
is do you want to how hard do you want to work for something? How committed are you to something? And that doesn't mean that you have to like never quit anything, right? I think there's always a right time to walk away from something when it's not the right situation for you. But if you know that you are where you're supposed to be, and that you're just going through a tough time, or it's going to take a ton of work and a ton of effort and a lot of diligence to get there, that wrestling background just sets you up, right? And then as well, and feel free to jump in whenever you want, because I could probably talk all day on this. But as a
Hmm.
last little thing, it's that self accountability aspect too, right? Because in wrestling, you are the only person out there on the mat. And so when you
Yeah.
lose a match, you lose a wrestle off, it is on you. You messed something up. You didn't bring your A game. You didn't train hard enough. You didn't, do what you needed to do to be the best that day. And so that again is that it's providing that blueprint to life, right? That you
Hmm.
are going to get knocked on your ass. And I promise you, like in life, you're going to get handed those losses, at work. You're going to miss out on that promotion. You're going to lose that case at trial. You're going to, you know, have that misstep as a parent or as a partner. But it's like, hey, all right, I know I'm still committed to doing those things and being great at them. So let's go back to the chalkboard, analyze what we need to do, and execute that.
Why take one vacation with the family when you could take all of them? With Royal Caribbean, you don't just go to the beach. You visit a private island and race down the tallest water slide in North America. You don't just go for a road trip. You ATV and zip line through the jungle. You don't just go somewhere new. You rappel down waterfalls and discover ancient temples. Because this isn't just any vacation. This is all the vacations. Come seek the Royal Caribbean. Ships Registry, Bahamas.
Yeah, no, I can't agree with you more. It definitely is a proving ground for you for life, because life is not easy at all, but if you can get through wrestling,
Yes.
right, man, everything else, is not as hard.
No, you're right, and it's so funny because I'll be when I'm coaching, and it's so hard to explain this to the younger the athlete, the harder it is. But I'm like, hey, I'm not. I mean, I'm here to teach you wrestling, and I'm here to teach you how to be great at the sport if you want to be. But like more importantly, I'm providing you with again, a blueprint. I'm providing you with a foundation and a structure for how to carry yourself out in life, right? And any sport really is like is on the job training, right? It's demonstrating that you can show up to something consistently, that you can give maximum effort towards it, that you can handle adversity, right? And that you can succeed and show up, right? And it's just so important.
I like that you said that, show up, because that's exactly what you need to do in life. And, and that's exactly what is required for wrestling. You have to show up. You have to be there, otherwise you're not going to wrestle, you're going to get smoked. Right.
Yep.
And, it does. It definitely, looking back now, it definitely provided me with a good foundation. It was a foundation that I already had there from my father and the work ethic, right? But wrestling just honed that and just made a better base for me later on in life. I unfortunately, like we talked earlier, I was a victim of a violent crime. I got stabbed. And that kind of changed my trajectory in high school from wrestling. I had wrestled since I was, 6 years old. So I kind of took a different route, wanted to go to the military and stuff like that. Absolutely hated people, right? needed to, I felt like I needed to protect myself and everything else, right? But wrestling definitely played a major part of my life. I remember looking out in the stands and seeing my mom there cheering me on too, you know what I mean? Because my dad worked a lot. But it definitely creates character for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, like I too, didn't take wrestling as far as I, theoretically could have, right? But it's those foundational years, right? You were in there 6 years old learning those lessons at a very early age. And I think it could be 1 year, it could be 10 years, it could be 20, that the impact is still lasting and it's still substantial, and I'm sure it set you up for handling all of this adversity. I mean, you say you're not a people person, but now, we're on a huge stage here with a podcast with all these listeners, and you're, talking to, all these individuals that, are mountain movers and world changers. So, I'm sure there's some aspect of it that carried in with that and your military service. I think they say like the two most represented athletes in like the Navy SEALs or Special Forces are wrestlers and water polo players. So
yeah,
there's got to be something behind that.
Oh yeah, for sure, man. That's what I was telling my wife. One of the toughest guys I ever met. I can't say his name, but he was on the SEAL teams, and he was a water polo guy. And this guy was just phenomenal in the water. I mean, he can just break out of the water waist height, you know what I mean? And just hold on to that ball and just be looking around, see where he can throw it, and God, yeah. he was phenomenal,
Yeah. And as like a pure land animal, I can't appreciate that enough. Like I'm not built for the water. Being a San Diegan, I've gone out. I've tried the surfing. I'll ride my I'll ride my skateboard down the boardwalk, and that's like
Mhm.
that's my board sport, right? But
Yeah.
yeah, I have so much appreciation for comfort in the water because it is just a completely different beast, and if you're not comfortable there, it can dominate you.
Well, even physically, I mean, wrestling, I mean, it just gives you that good base, right?
Yes.
I mean, I feel so much stronger knowing that, just because of past experiences, past training and stuff like that. If someone tries to take me down, they're gonna have a hard time. There's
Uh,
no doubt in my mind. You know what I'm saying? Um,
yes.
so it just builds that self confidence, and man, it just does so many amazing things. It really does. I highly recommend wrestling for young boys, and
Yeah.
now girls are doing it too, right?
Yeah, I think we were chatting about that a little bit before we started the podcast. I read an article the other day that was saying
Hmm.
that um, women's wrestling is actually the fastest growing women's sport in the country. So
Hmm.
you're seeing more university programs implement women's wrestling teams. I think most high school teams in the country right now are mixed. So you have men's and women's wrestling together, but you're seeing more and more high school programs actually having sufficient numbers to set up their
Hmm.
own women's programs, which I think is just an amazing thing for the sport, um, an amazing thing culturally. I think that you know opening that up to women and making
Hmm.
the sport more appealing to them, and more popular is only going to like pay dividends down the line, for our society generally, right?
Yeah, exactly, for sure. And then just being a dad, if my daughter wanted to wrestle, I'm glad that there's more women in there to wrestle her. The same gender, not
Yes.
transgender or anything like that. I don't know. I don't agree with that. I think and this is just my personal beliefs, right? Um, a man who can't make it in a man's sport and then all of a sudden he switches genders to wrestle against a girl, I think that is not okay. Not okay in my book at all.
Yeah, it's certainly gotten its fair share of news coverage recently. I think I saw a post the other day that said, I'm fine with legalizing gambling as long as we, also allow us to bet on the sports with the transgender competitors as well, right? Because then I'll just be a
Yeah.
millionaire. But yeah, I mean, I think that the bigger picture is just making sure because wrestling is a contact sport and
Yeah.
there is close body contact and making sure that the proper protocols and procedures are followed and that everybody feels comfortable and that you know you just don't want to even create the environment for
Hmm.
any concern, right? And so I think at the end of the day, like when we're coaching and when we're planning out practices and programs and things like that, it's keeping that in mind because at the end of the day, like that's what's most important, right? We want to make sure that the sport continues receiving only positive news and that everyone that's doing it, I mean, we want them to be uncomfortable while they're wrestling, like we want them to be challenged, but we don't want to
Yeah.
be uncomfortable in that respect, right?
Yeah, for sure. You don't want them getting thrown on their head and you
Yeah.
know what I mean? But
Yeah.
so you talked about Nacho Franco, right?
Yes.
And how it sounded to me like he was pretty big, like he had a major positive role in your life. Um,
Yeah.
was he looked up to as a father figure for you, or how
Yeah,
did that
absolutely.
work?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so it kind of ties back to what you were saying. As
Uh-huh.
as you're a young man hitting those teenage years, you start, you have all this energy. You're like you have all this emotion pumping through you, and all this, you know, just general like almost like that, that teenage angst that you gotta direct it in the right way, or it can be very dangerous, right?
Yeah.
It's really easy to go down the wrong path, and you're wanting to like challenge those norms and rules and things like that. And I think for me, you know, growing up, that was something that wasn't as big of a deal until I started hitting that age where I didn't have that male role model to kind of institute that structure, that grit, that toughness. And it's tough because if you're not raised, with a father who you've known as your father your entire life, you're very like standoffish to the idea of it, right? And I think
Yeah.
it's something that you also talked about in one of your other podcasts, where it's like you want to balance that approachability and appreciation with still being, that authority figure who can still render decisions, have those decisions be respected, and but then still be approachable. And I think that he did a really good job at that. He was like a little bit younger when we both met, so he kind of had
Mhm.
that like coolness factor to him, And as a young kid, it was something that I looked up to. And then also it was him basically opening my eyes to like, hey, commit your energy and commit all of that inside of you to this, and here's the
Mm.
potential payoff, right? Here's how you can be great within the sport and in life. And I grabbed onto that, right? It was just like a light bulb went on, and I realized that was how I wanted to dedicate my life to, just not only wrestling but all my endeavors, right?
Mhm.
And so, he was somebody that I was able to confide into. I think, as a young man, it's there's a lot of topics that you might not want to talk about with mom, right? And again,
Mhm.
going back to your thing where we sort of start to make these transitions and in who we connect with more, and he really filled that role for me. I mean, one of my most vivid memories with him are him and I riding to and from practice. He'd come pick me up either, on the way to practice or on the way back, whether it was a normal practice or we'd catch an extra practice on like a weekend day or something. And just
Yeah.
having like, you know, young man to the wiser older man, like heart to hearts, right? And just talking about the most random stuff, just the, girls, life, college, random topics even outside of wrestling, but like having someone to confide in that with, bounce ideas off of, um, and like feel like there was that support there, was just instrumental for me in sort of paving my way as a young man. And as we've gotten older, as we both progressed, our relationship has also molded into, developing more of that friendship aspect of it, where he knows now it's less of less of an authority figure and more of like an advisor and a collaborator. And so it's been really cool to just kind of watch our relationship progress. And I would assume, it's much like a traditional, family role, where the father and son kind of have that similar path.
Yeah, no, and that's the importance. That's why I invited you onto this podcast is that power of mentorship, right? And
Yes.
just being able to see that in a young boy's life, because you're absolutely right, man. You hit that time of age where you start venturing away from mama, you start wanting to get out there and, lack of better words, put your feet out there and see how it is, right? And
Hmm.
you definitely need that male to show you and guide you and kind of be there for you to fill that void, right? With mentors like Nacho, I thought that was interesting that you said that you wanted to emulate him, and that's the importance of men and fathers and husbands, right? You have to be that person that your children want to emulate, looking
Yes.
up to him and saying how he still had that cool aspect and stuff like that. You know what I mean? It's absolutely true. I remember growing up and picking out and being drawn to certain men and gravitating towards these certain men that I saw something within them that I liked, whether it be a football coach or a wrestling coach, or even in the military, there are certain instructors that I had that I thought were absolutely freaking amazing, the way they talk or the way they carried themselves. And I wanted to emulate myself after them as well. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. No, I mean, and I think you nail it perfectly right there, right? Because
mhm,
as a young man, like, and and or woman really, but like in your youth, what you're exposed to, right, are as potential mentors, as potential people to emulate, a lot of times aren't necessarily the best role models, right? I mean,
yep.
whether it's like YouTube personalities, rappers, actors, these kinds of people that live in this sort of fairy tale land that's projected to these kids, and it's just not the reality, not something that you want to strive to. And when you find those individuals in the community that can find that perfect balance of, and it's something that I think we're always working on, but finding that balance of like being like, hey, like I'm not just some like square laced up, person. I also have coolness aspects to me as well, but like I'm also going to be that person that provides you with a strong moral compass and
Hmm.
leads by example. And I think that you talked about that a lot as well, in a couple of your different podcasts, the one with what was it, Paul Kaler as well,
Oh
and he
yeah,
was
yeah.
like, yeah, and I remember what were you saying? You like talking about how his daughter learned that courage from him,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I was like, I remember I got the chills when I heard that. I was like, she absolutely did, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that is what, I hope to continue doing as a mentor. And like, I hope that young men and women can take from a mentor is like, look at, find that person that, and, find that person that can inspire you and also challenge you to live up to your best self, right?
Mm-hmm. And that's what's needed nowadays too. I think too many parents now are trying not to be the parent and trying to be the friend,
So
right?
true.
We're
So true.
seeing, and it's so detrimental. I mean, it's crazy because now I got parents saying, "Hey, man, I don't know what I did, blah blah blah, this and this," and it's like, well, stop trying to be the friend. They need a parent.
Yes.
You know what I mean? They need a parent. They need those boundaries. They need love. Love on your kids, dude.
Yes.
Stop stop taking things so personally, you know? The Bible clearly states that foolishness is stored up in the heart of a child. So when your child does something foolish and dumb, and that's backed by science, you know, your frontal cortex doesn't fully develop until you're 24. So that means you're going to be doing stupid stuff. So don't take
Yes.
it personal when they do that. Just know that they need more training, and that's your role, you know?
It is, and it starts at an early age too, right? Like I love
Mm-hmm.
the analogy of um, the little, the family that has an older cat and they get a
Mm-hmm.
little puppy, right? And that cat is bigger than the puppy when they first get it, right? And that cat's just like laying down the law. The cat's like, "Hey, I'm the head of the household. Don't you think that you run this place?" And then all of a sudden, this dog's 100-pound Malinois, and you see him, he's still scared of the cat, right? Because the cat made that foundation. And I think so often you see that, and I've seen it whether it's with the kids I interact with in coaching or elsewhere, and it's like you can tell the difference when those children have had their parents build that good foundation with them at an early age,
Mm-hmm.
because at a certain point it's like that it's like compound interest. It builds up, and then it's like these parents are like, oh shit, like I didn't lay down the law early, I didn't set expectations early, and 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 there were negative repercussions as a result, right? So
Mm-hmm.
and that's not to say that every case is the same or anything's set in stone, but I couldn't agree more.
Man, I like that you said compound interest. I've never seen it
Yeah.
like that or worded that way. That's awesome. I'm going to steal
I,
that from you.
I apply it to everything, right? Like
Yeah.
I'm a big self-help book guy. I just read Atomic Habits, and it's like his thing was like a little positive change executed consistently over a long period of time will compound, right? Whether that's the gym, uh, you know, reading your Bible, spending time with your kids, whatever it is,
Hmm.
those little additional efforts will, add up at the end of the day.
And that could be both negative and positive, right?
Oh, 100%, 100%, right? Because that's, you know, that one time that you allow, a bad day to lead you to having, two drinks after work. Well, then and then the next day that happens again, and that's your go-to thing, right? And so it's like,
Hmm.
that's something that I think we all can work on. And I'm not saying in the drinking stage specifically, but like recognizing when we are allowing those negative like habits to form, because they will compound over time. And then when you want to break away from them, it makes it even harder, right?
Hmm. And I think that's where we're at today as a society, you know? Um, People now are waking up and they don't like where America is. They don't, right? But it's like, dude, we didn't get here overnight, and you complaining about this next generation, how lazy they are, or this generation doesn't know how to work and all this stuff. It's like, well, who do you think raised this generation?
You're not wrong. You're not wrong.
The-
And yeah, and I think and those qualms that we have with society are only worsened by the fact that everything is just a click away. Like the dopamine hit from scrolling Instagram. We can order any food we want to our door in 5 minutes. Like we order something from Amazon, it's on our front porch within a day. Like we're not and I'm a huge advocate for earning your dopamine, right? Like,
Hmm.
and we're just so, we're in this, I think, time in our society where everyone expects to be happy and comfortable all the time. And I
Hmm.
just think it's just not the healthy way that our bodies are designed to live and the way that the world should be, right? Like, I'm a big believer in the 50-50 rule. Like, life is 50% good times and 50% bad times. And there are, degrees of happiness and sadness within that, but it's a balance, right? And we have to be constantly challenging ourselves, have to be constantly seeking that. And I think, just society's lost that a little bit. I think there's a decent
Hmm.
movement towards breaking away from that, but yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, and I agree 100% with you, Connor. There's a passage that I read in the scriptures that talked about I've learned how to. Paul talks about it, and he says that he's learned how to be content in whatever life he's in, whether it be shipwrecked, in prison, being whipped and chained, having the good life, whatever. He's learned to be content, right? And
Mm,
I take that a step further and I look at it like we need to be not only content, right? Because it's not really the word content. That's not a really a great word, but it's not being moved, I should say, right?
right.
When life throws you this curveball, we can't let that take us down, right? And I think that's where wrestling, plays a big part of that, right? For wrestlers, right? Because we
Yes.
know adversity, okay?
Yes.
And I think if people would understand that and exercise that more and not let hiccups in life slow you down, because the only thing guaranteed in life is there's going to be pain and death. That's the only guarantee of life,
Absolutely.
right?
Yes, and you should be thankful for that pain, right? Like, I've gone through some really tough things in my life. I've been through a divorce, been through the trials and tribulations of being raised by a single mother, through law school, all these things, being at academy for Homeland Security for 6 months locked on a base in Georgia. And you have to appreciate that pain, right? You have to be thankful for it because all of it is crafting you and molding you into a way that will allow you to be a stronger, better individual on the other side of it, right? As long as
Mhm.
you are approaching it from a healthy perspective with good emotional intelligence, learning from mistakes, learning from the adversity, and allowing it to be an inspiration rather than a detriment, right? Like,
Mhm.
um, and that's just a foundation for me in my life, in my work, everything that I take on is like, I signed up for, and even for the things I didn't sign up for, right? Like, there's an opportunity for me to learn from that situation, from that pain, from that struggle.
Mhm. Yeah, and just
Absolutely.
looking at it as growing moments, right?
Yes, sir.
Now, Connor, you talked about Homeland Security. Um, how was that like, man? I gotta ask you, bro.
Yeah. So it's a cool story. I was working in Big Law,
Hmm.
at Quinn Emanuel, which is like you said, it's one of the top law firms in the country. I was just working insane hours. I was being paid very well, but just feeling like I wasn't really serving any real purpose. I was just making rich people more rich, serving, these mega corporations. And I had a really cool mentor, in one of my law school classes who had been involved with some federal agencies, and he was like, "Hey, if anyone ever is interested in mentorship or wants to talk, let me know." So I hit him up, and I was, telling him how dissatisfied I was, and that I was, considering the military, local law enforcement, all these things. And he looked at me and he said, "You have 30,000 days on this earth. The first 10,000 are spent in diapers, being told what to do, and the last 10,000 are spent in diapers, being told what to do. You get 10,000 of effective days, use them wisely." And I was like, holy expletive, I'm sold, right? Like,
Yeah.
and so he kind of helped me lay the groundwork for getting involved in it. And I shot out all the applications to all the agencies, and then took a job as a prosecutor while I was waiting, because you never know with the application process, background checks, polygraphs, all that stuff, whether
Yeah.
you'll actually get through. And so when the call actually came through, um, it was kind of this judgment time, because I was doing really well as a prosecutor, set up to kind of like take that path. Um, and I thought about it, and I was like, I mean, it just sounded like way too much fun. It sounded like just an opportunity to be a part of something just bigger than myself and something great, serve my country, right? Going
Yeah.
back to like that dissatisfaction with where our world's at and like the current perception of law enforcement, it was like I can be that beacon of change, right? And so I took on the
Yeah.
opportunity, and just an amazing experience. I can't say that I ever worked with better people, with a better team, with people more motivated to take on tasks, right? Because like we joke in the government, the only reward for good work is more work, right? It's
Mhm.
not like a profit-driven industry where like I arrested three more bad guys than him this year. Like, do I get my bonus? It's like, no, everyone gets paid the same. So everyone is literally just doing it for the love of the game. Um, and just the amount of things that I've been able to learn and be a part of, like things that you just think like you see in the movies and you're like, there's no way that they actually do that. We have, I mean, like, you know, recording devices and like video and audio bugs and like secret compartments, like kill switches on cars. I was one of the, I don't know if you saw the news, but like I was on our SWAT team when we found the drug tunnel in Otay. So I was like one of the first law enforcement officers in the agents in the country to like see it.
Mhm.
Um, you know, like flying all over the country to do operations. And it was just very rewarding work. I mean, I did a lot of like narcotics related work, but also had a huge opportunity to work with our human trafficking team and our child exploitation team. And I
Mhm.
can honestly say that, so like Tim Ballard, for example, the Sound of Freedom, he was a child exploitation agent out of
Mhm.
Calexico, actually. But that work is just it's the most righteous thing I think that any law enforcement agency is doing, and it's a
Yeah.
shame because I don't think it gets enough attention in the media, and people don't want to hear about it because of how heinous it is. But those individuals are really just like I just can't speak highly enough about the work that they do and the individuals that they take down that just absolutely deserve to be put away and locked up the key, right? Um, but yeah, I mean, it was great,
Mhm.
and and loved the experience and what it taught me. I think it was really important for someone like myself. I know, like you, having served in the military, you came to learn that chain of command aspect, that squared away, like prim and proper aspect that you need to carry with what you do. But I really never had that
Mhm.
with all my other positions, and I think learning that and experiencing that and that team first mentality really set me up well when I decided to branch off and start the law firm. um, and what really I think motivated that was like me taking a step back and saying, like, because I was just working so hard. I was running cases on our SWAT team, like is MIA from home, from my family, loved ones, and I was like, all right, like, what's the way that I can have the best amount of impact on the community, still advocate for justice, still make things right within the legal system, but do so in a way that I'm in control and that I'm able to, take care of my family, take care of the community, and really start to take the reins on how we do it, right? Because I'm sure, as you're aware, being in the military or in the government, like you are really kind of at the whim of the chain of command, and you are that cog, and I love being a part of that.
Yeah.
But there was this part inside of me that wanted to, have my own baby, run my own shop, create my own destiny. And the beauty of it is like getting to be able to help individuals who are facing adversity while doing that was the cherry on top of the sundae.
Yeah, for sure. And just because you go to the military, that just doesn't mean that that's the pinnacle of your career or anything like that, right? You're always striving to get to that next level, like you were.
Yes.
I think as a man, you always got to have a purpose. I think that's where a lot of depression sets in when you lose that purpose. And I think we're always constantly looking um, to fill that void, right? To feel like we're are a part of something bigger, right? I
Yes.
know that even in marriages with men, when a man feels like he's not validated, when a man feels like he just can't do anything right, and his wife is always browbeating him constantly, yo, you do nothing right. I can't believe you're not a good leader. You're not a good whatever it may be, right? That man starts taking that personally, right? Obviously. And he starts internalizing that, and he starts believing that about himself. And that's where that whole depression starts settling in. And how do men deal with depression? When you don't deal with it and you don't transfer that pain, it gets transferred and it comes out in anger, you know?
Yes, and I think that touches down on an even, you know, I couldn't agree more, and it touches down on an even bigger point. And I think you talked about this a little bit in your most recent podcast, but like
Mhm.
in the law enforcement community, in the military community, in the generally in the male community, there's this stigma against feeling feelings, human
Mhm.
feelings, right, and emotional intelligence, and being vulnerable and expressing your wants and needs, and being allowed to be that way, right? And I think so often like men are, and it's a product of our upbringing and the culture that we're raised in, but it's like, hey, like life's tough, get a helmet, suck it up, show up, buttercup, right? Like,
Yeah.
and so, and there's some truth to that. Like sometimes, yeah, you do just need to like show up and take on the suck and get through this tough moment. um but also like for long-term health, both emotional, physical, spiritual, like you need to be emotional. You need to develop that emotional intelligence, right? Whether you're a
Yeah.
father, a friend, a husband, a coworker, and if you're not, receiving that, being able to communicate that with your partner to get that
Mhm.
and have those healthy conversations. And so for me, I know that I am still a huge advocate for, you know, getting that emotional intelligence whether it be through therapy. I'm a huge advocate for therapy. Love my therapist so much.
Mhm.
Whether it's through your religion, I'm an advocate for a combination of both, obviously. And that's a huge thing for me because I think in those communities, and especially in the men's community, we're very hesitant to jump into that.
Yeah, for sure. No, I like that you said, religion, and you gave all these different examples of how to get that emotional intelligence. I did a podcast about emotional intelligence, and that's how a lot of companies are going now. It used to be EQ or IQ, and now it's EQ is what they're
So
looking
true.
for.
So
And
true.
I think now there's a lot of people out there who are super super in tune to it, trying to be a man. They want to learn how to chop wood, they want to learn how to shoot, and they want to do
Yeah.
jujitsu and all this stuff, right? But they're missing the aspect of it, which is that emotional intelligence that you need to develop. I was asked as a guest on a podcast, well, what do you do to stay manly or feel like a man? I was like, man, I don't need to do anything. I'm trying to learn that emotional intelligence to bring that back down, because I'm
Yes.
I'm over the top with, and I'm not
Yes.
trying to say that to brag or nothing, but I know what it's like to chop wood. I know what it's like to go hunting and skinning and fishing, and I know what it's like to wrestle and everything like that. Man, I'm a journeyman lineman by trade. That's one of the hardest jobs you could possibly do, in the
I
elements and
was
the
just
high
gonna say that if
accordingly.
there's not a more like quintessential man's man role, it is that.
Yeah, and it's like, man, I don't need to do that. I need to tone it down and get that emotional intelligence like you're talking about, so I could be more balanced. I think there's an imbalance, you know?
Yes, absolutely. And I think what I found through my journey with that, and I it's funny because I'll talk to my like therapist about it and say,
Mhm.
man, I wish I would have started this earlier, because it's like the more you get in tune with those emotions, the more that you get in tune with like the fact that you're a human. You're supposed to feel bad when something sad happens. You're supposed to feel happy when something good, like you're supposed to feel the
Mhm.
full range of it. And the more that you develop that, I think it allows you to be a more well-rounded man. And it's like, and this is the opposite of the glass, right? Like there's no detriment to the other side of it when you're developing, your emotional intelligence. Like you can still be a emotionally intelligent individual who understands emotions and communicates those and processes them in a healthy way, and then wake up at 04 the next morning, throw your plate carrier on and kick a door in. Like I don't think that there needs to be some divide there. And I think it's obviously probably going to be more of a challenge for that type of individual because you are needing to compartmentalize and live in two different kind of worlds sometimes. But like
Yeah.
it's doable. It's absolutely doable. And I think we don't give our brains enough credit for what they're capable of, right? And what we're emotionally capable of.
I agree 100%. And I like that you said about compartmentalization, right? Because as men, that's what we do. We live in different boxes.
Yeah.
There's a great book out there. Men are like waffles, women are like spaghetti. And it talks about how men, we live in these boxes, right? And we can only be in one box at once. And if we start hopping from box to box, like, like waffle boxes,
Yeah.
it messes us up. It like throws our whole, dynamic off. Our sag is off. We're done, right? And
Yes.
it's true. We tend to spend more time in the boxes that we feel most comfortable or needed in. And I think a lot of times men feel so comfortable at work that when they go home, they feel like a fish out of water. They don't
Oh,
like that feeling. So what do? They spend more time at
more
work.
time working. Oh my gosh. I think that is all right. We're gonna cut the pot. No, I'm just kidding. That is it, right? And that was me. Um, that was me through law school, through my practice as an agent. Like I knew how to be a good law student. I knew how to be a great agent and a great lawyer. Like, but then I'd come home and I was like, I didn't have those tools, and it hurt, and it was tough, and it was painful, and I didn't want to feel that, right? But like
Hmm.
Brene Brown, like that famous psychologist in her TED Talks, like without vulnerability, there is no growth, and
Mm.
without like being like through pain, we achieve that growth, and like you got to take on those tough topics, those tough conversations, those you know difficult embracing of those emotions, because the more that you do, the more efficient you get at processing them in a healthy way, right? Yeah, you're so right. Men are like waffles. So you took the compound interest, I'm gonna take the waffle one, and then now we're even. I have heard young men be compared to German shepherds or Malinois, though. Like you have to
Hmm.
give them a task and keep them exercise, because otherwise they'll chew up your slippers and tear up your couch.
Ain't that the truth? I got two little boys right now, and they
It's true.
thrive on direction. Like, if I even just kind of just not ignore them, that's the wrong word, but if I just let them do whatever they're going to do, they
Yeah.
will start tearing up the house. And it's like, dude, come on, go pull weeds. And okay, what do we need? And then they start pulling out their little gloves, and they pull out their little, and it's like, they like it, they need
Yes.
that direction, and I think for little girls, it's a lot different. Before they do any kind of task or anything like that, they got to know that they have a relationship with you, right? So
Mm,
it's a lot different for little girls. And if you're trying to raise a little girl like you do a boy, it's not going to work. You know what I mean?
yeah.
So
Yeah.
they do have different needs that you need to address. I wanted to ask you one thing, Connor, before we get off here and before I give you an opportunity to reach out to people and let people know how to get a hold of you if they want to talk to you. I know that you've worn a lot of different hats like I have, uh, Homeland Security and all this different stuff, right? So the feeling when it comes down to the highs and lows of jobs, right?
Yes.
Whether it be a police officer, a firefighter, even a journeyman lineman or a military, right? We have these real high highs, right? When you're waiting to take down somebody or do a shipboard takedown, or you're going to go fly on a helicopter and work out the end of a skid on a 500 kV line, whatever it may be, right? Run into a burning building, get in a shootout as a cop, or take over high risk traffic, uh, serve a high risk traffic ticket or whatever. There's a lot of highs and a lot of lows. And when you have those highs, those spikes, it drains you, right?
Yeah,
And when you
absolutely.
come home, you don't have nothing left for your family. Have you seen a difference now that you've made that change from Homeland Security and the adrenaline rush and stuff like that, or how have you settled into this role that you're in now? Has it been hard to do? If you
You
don't
know,
mind me asking.
no, I don't mind you asking at all. And I think you're absolutely right. Like I still remember like we'd be like sitting on a, you know, waiting to execute like an arrest or a takedown in a parking lot or something like that, and I'd be like in the back of like a hot Sprinter van, and of course like the AC breaks, right? And you're just like sitting there in your full kit, and you're like literally like about to fall asleep, even though you're like about to do something intense, and then it switches on, and you're like boom, hop out, like guns out, that kind of thing. And it's like this, like you said, just this immediate spike, and then it'll carry, and then all of a sudden it'll be like a few hours later, and you'll be like back at the desk. Like this is how crazy the job was, right? Like I'd be like in the field, like guns drawn on somebody, arresting him, and then like 2 hours later, I'd be like back at the office typing a report, eating a salad, and drinking a Diet Coke, right? And then all of a sudden,
Yeah.
you're like, whoa, like I feel like I'm ready for bed right now, and it's 2 in the afternoon. Um, and now, I mean, I think that it's funny because like the legal practice has its different types of stress and those different like adrenaline moments. Like I still get nervous, like I still get those same butterflies like before a wrestling match, before I address a jury or engage in a closing argument, or have a mediation with opposing counsel right before it starts. I'm like, there's those like pre-match jitters, and it's nice because it kind of reminds me of being back in the day there. But
Hmm.
so I would say that it's a little bit different, yes, because I think the schedule is more consistent. Like there's less, hey babe, I got to go out at 2 in the morning and slap a tracker on this suspect's car while he's sleeping. And it's more of like, hey, I just grinded for 12 hours and I'm getting home at 10 p.m. So it's like I would say that the stress is comparable as far as the quantity goes, but it's just like the way it kind of plays out is different. And for me, I think my biggest recommendation in how I've like come to learn to manage that is one, like prioritizing yourself. It's not selfish to prioritize your own self-care.
Yeah.
It's like I always call it the airplane seatbelt or airplane gas mask method, right?
Yep.
You gotta put yours on before you put your kids on, because if you're like passed out from no O2 and you can't put your kids mask on, well then now you're both screwed, right? So
Yep.
it's making sure that you're carving out those dedicated times to hit the gym, to meditate, to go for a walk, to ride your skateboard down the block or whatever, right?
Hmm.
And then also I think it's communicating those, like where you're at and where you're coming from with your partner, right? Like again, Renee Brown, lover, she had a post the other day that was like, people say marriage is 50-50. Like it's not. Like some days I have 20 and you've got 80, and some days you've got 80 and I've got 20. And it's like the more you communicate that to your spouse, I think like your partner, especially if you're with the right person, will understand that and wants to help support you and facilitate that. So if you tell her like, hey, I just had a crazy day, like my buddy almost fell off the helicopter while we were trying to change this cable, or like, hey, like we arrested a dude who like pulled a gun out on us today, and I'm mentally fried. Like it's communicating that, right, and like
Yeah.
verbalizing it, even just getting it out, talking about it too, right, and not being afraid to do those things, especially if you're doing it in a healthy way.
Man, I can't agree with you more, Connor. Well, brother, I just want to give you this opportunity to tell our audience if they want to get a hold of you or whatever, anything you want to share with them right now. The floor is yours, brother. I
Yeah.
appreciate you.
Well, and I have to reciprocate. I can't thank you enough for having me on the show. It's been amazing experience, great vibe, great conversations. I think it took directions that I hadn't even planned, but was just so happy we had a chance to chat about. Yeah, obviously would love to just let the people know. You can find me online at Trombetta Law, www.trombetta.law. We're on social media as well, Trombetta Law. And yeah, I mean, just excited to be in this stage of my life, advocating for individuals who have faced, any type of injustice. It gets me excited hearing about the opportunity to help individuals who have been taken advantage of, who are facing a tough situation, and being able to help them through that and be that shepherd to guide them through, the complexities of the legal system are just, I'm just so thankful for all these blessings. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely, brother. Well, thank you once again, brother, and we appreciate you and keep doing that good work out there, brother. And we'll be talking to you soon.
All right. Thanks so much.